Welcome to the Big Screen Symposium podcast. This session is from the Big Screen Symposium held in Auckland on the 4th and 5th of December 2020. In this session, we hear from Australian multi-hyphenate Scott Ryan about his process creating, writing and starring in crime drama series Mr. In Between. FX renewed the series for a third season, which was in production when this session was recorded. Scott is the sole writer and Nash Edgerton is the sole director across the seasons. Mr. In Between is based on the 2005 feature film The Magician, which is also written by and stars Scott Ryan. This session is moderated by entertainment journalist, film critic and broadcaster Dominic Corry.
Kia ora koutou, everybody. My name is Dominic Corry. Welcome to this panel at the Big Screen Symposium 2020. I'm going to introduce our special guest today.
Yeah, mate.
This is Scott Ryan, the creator, star, and writer of Mr. In Between. Thanks for being here, Scott.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for having me. And hello to everybody else that's there.
We're going to kick things off with a bit of VT. We've got a trailer for the first season and then a couple of promotional stings that'll just sort of set the tone, get you guys familiar with the show and the vibe of it. So should we roll that out now?
Sounds good.
Tell us a little bit about why you're here.
My name is Ray. I'm 40. Got a kid. Divorced.
Do you think that you've got an anger problem?
No.
Okay.
Birds flying high, you know how I feel.
So if you're in jail and you disrespect somebody,
Sun in the sky,
you can end up dead.
you know how I feel.
There's consequences. But out here in the real world,
Why don't you watch where you're going, eh?
What was that?
there's no consequences
And I'm feeling
because people let them get away with it.
good.
You right, old man?
You enjoy hitting people?
I wouldn't say I enjoy hitting people.
Stars when you shine,
How she ends up with you?
She must be desperate.
scent of the pine.
I'm pretty big on respect.
You know how I
If you don't, we got a problem.
It's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life.
So in your mind, you've done society a favour.
And I'm feeling
Yeah. Well, Barney's like, like a fight. What's a bludger?
Hey.
Well, lazy prick. Well, a boot is like a shoe, or it's like a trunk.
You got out of the boot.
What do you put in a boot? No, you can put groceries, you can put a body, you can put just about anything.
Where's your dunny?
What's a dunny? I'm going to cut your dick off. And then I'm going to go flush it in the dunny. Oh, dunny's a toilet.
Okay. Just to remind you, we're going to have audience Q&A towards the end, so put your questions into the app, and we'll get to those a bit later. Now, if you guys aren't aware, Scott created this character for a film that came out in 2005 called The Magician. Scott, where did this character come from?
I read a book probably 25 years ago called Contract Killer, and it was about a New York hitman, and it was a sort of real life account of his life and what he did for a living, and that was the start of it. And I just thought it was an interesting character. And then, of course, I started reading Chopper Reed's books after that, and sort of got me into true crime. And I guess it was just a lot of reading, a lot of research over a number of years. And I guess he's kind of like an amalgamation of a lot of those different characters that I'd read about in these books.
And The Magician was a self-funded film, is that correct?
Yeah, originally. I was living in a house, a rooming house, and a developer bought it and they were going to tear it down or something, and they never did, so I ended up staying there for about 6 months rent-free. So basically I just used the rent money that to basically fund the film.
And when you were making the film back then, did you sense the potential longevity of the character? Did you know that there was sort of more places you could go with it?
Not until later on, I mean, for me, it was just making the film was just a way to get my foot in the door. And that's really all it was designed to do. And it wasn't until later that I thought to myself, well, I've got, the thing with The Magician and having no money is there were so many things that I wanted to do, but I didn't have the resources. I didn't have a crew. I didn't have a lot of the things you need. So after The Magician was done and dusted, I had a bunch of ideas and I just kind of wrote them down and thought, well, maybe I don't know why I thought a TV show, but I just thought, yeah, maybe might get a TV show out of some of these ideas. And then I get a call from a producer saying, hey, have you thought about doing it as a TV show? And I said, well, yeah, I have actually. And that's how it all started.
How long after the film came out was that?
The film came out in 2005, so I'd say probably 2006, I think.
So it's been quite a long road to getting the TV show up and running.
Yeah, I'd say probably I started writing things down in about 2005. So it took about 13 years, 12 or 13 years to get it on screens. Was
there a lot of heartache in that time? And that's quite a long development period. Did it come close to happening and then not happening? Take me through that process.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, we developed it with SBS originally. That was the first thing that we did, and then I think it was after that we pitched it to HBO, and they were interested. They saw it. They watched The Magician. They loved that. So we started talking to them, and we were going to do a pilot with them, but some things happened, and so that went by the wayside. And then we were still trying to get it made in Australia, but there was sort of a lot of pushback. People didn't want me to, star in it. Some people did. Some people were fine with that. Some people weren't fine with it. But it's just one of those things. I mean, everybody sort of goes through it. You have a bunch of projects and some get up and some don't, It's just the reality of the industry, I guess.
Was that because you weren't an established name that they didn't want you to star in it, or?
Well, I guess. I mean, I don't know. I mean, when we developed it with SBS, they had no problem with me starring in it. They'd seen the film and they were certainly behind that. And then, it was a matter there of somebody else, somebody, changed job roles and the person that came in didn't like the idea of the show. And then, that it felt, and that just, that happens, it's just the reality of the way it is, I
don't want to seem like I'm blowing smoke, but it's just impossible to, you're a living embodiment of this character. It feels like your on-screen presence is so key to the tonal tightrope that this show walks. I can't imagine. Did you ever consider doing it with someone else on camera?
I mean, we couldn't get it made for years, and I said to Nash, I said, mate, look, just whatever. Like, if you can find somebody else, just make it. I'm okay with that. Nash wasn't really interested in doing it with somebody else in it. I never really understood that on the part of some people, because, I mean, really the Magician is, an 85-minute audition for the show. So if you don't like the film and you don't like what I did, well, why are you even talking to me, kind of thing, like, why are you even thinking about doing it?
Yeah. You mentioned Nash. Excuse me. Nash Edgerton directs every episode of the show. He was a key collaborator in developing the series. I understand he saw The Magician very early on and sort of helped get it out into theatres and stuff like that. Can you talk about your collaboration from the early days?
Well, I made The Magician. I had a rough cut, and it was a feature at that point, and I couldn't get it. I couldn't get any traction with it. And I cut it down to a half-hour version for the St Kilda Film Festival. And that was kind of like my last hurrah. It's like, well, if this doesn't, get me anywhere, then that's it. I'm just going to, maybe do something else. So I cut it down. I put it in the St Kilda Film Festival. I went to the screening. And when I came out of the screening, this guy comes up to me and says, hey, I really liked your film. I love it. It's great. And I said, oh, thanks, man. And that was Nash. And his brother Joel was working on something at the time. He was thinking about doing a mockumentary. And Nash said, look, can I get a copy of the short? And I said, look, man, I don't have one. I've only got a feature version. I've only cut one copy to put it in the festival. And he's like, oh, okay. And he's, he was thinking to himself, how's this going to work as a feature? I don't know. I like the short, but... And he said, okay. So I gave him a copy of the feature, and he and Joel, and I think Dave Michaud, they sort of had a bit of a screening in his apartment and watched it. And then he called me and said, look, I want to try to help you get it out there. And I said, look, if you're going to do that, at least put your name on it, so at least you get something out of it if all goes well. And he said, look, I think we should re-edit it. And I said, yeah, fine. Like, I'm not an editor, I'm not a producer. I'm not at that stage certainly wasn't. And so, but I had to do a lot of different, originally I just wanted to be a writer. That's all I wanted to do. And then I figured, well, I'm not getting anywhere as a writer, so I've got to become a director and make my own stuff. So I became a director, and then I thought, well, I can't afford to pay anybody to be in this film, so I'm going to have to act in it as well. So I went from being a guy that just wanted to be a writer to being a guy that was now a director and an actor, and I had to be a producer, and then I had to learn how to edit, and I had no idea how to do that. So I had to get Final Cut and learn how to, edit and do all these things. And catering, I did all the catering on the auditions. So I learned that. We had no crew. There was no first AD, second AD, third AD. I was feeding everybody. I was taking care of the props. I was doing the costumes. I was shopping for costumes. Basically everything, hiring cars and paying for it all out of my pocket. So I learned a lot about a lot of different jobs, on a set, and here we are now. But Nash thought, we should re-edit, and I said, yeah, sure. So I went up to Sydney and we recut it with Chris Rowe. Chris Rowe did a lot of the cutting, and Nash and I were involved in sort of that as well. And then Nash knew Michelle Bennett. He got Michelle Bennett. It showed Michelle Bennett. She came on board, and then, I think it was Hopscotch we invited them in to have a look at it, and they came in and saw it and said, right, we want to distribute it theatrically. So
just going back to that initial production, it's a great story of, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and doing what needed to be done. How nerve-wracking was it getting in front of the camera?
It wasn't that nerve-wracking at that point because basically there was no crew. The guy holding the camera was a character in the film. There's no crew. I knew all these guys, and it was heavily improvised. So it was actually quite easy to do it, as opposed to first season of the TV show, where I had no professional experience as an actor, and I showed up the first day on set and there's trucks everywhere and cameras and people. There's 50, 60 people walking around. And, I had a bit of a moment where I had to use the men's room before I went on to do the first take. So it was pretty nerve-wracking.
Well, you're clearly a natural. Did Nash play a role in developing the movie into the TV show? How was that process?
Yeah, the process of that was Nash and Michelle Bennett came on board early on as CPs, and then it was basically just a matter of sort of developing it from there, with SBS and. A lot of talking, a lot of, all that kind of good stuff to get it where it is now.
And you mentioned that you'd pitched it to HBO and some other American outlets. I mean, it's pretty rare for an Australian TV show to go onto a major American network. How did you guys? Did the film alert these people to your talents and the potential of it? How did you get a relationship with these American networks?
Well, we actually got in there through Danny McBride's production company, Rough House. They knew Nash and Nash knew them, and he'd shown them the scripts and they loved them. And so they said, come on out and we'll pitch it. And originally we were going to do it in America. The thought was to do it as an Aussie hitman in the US. So, which would have been quite interesting, I think. But that's kind of how we opened some doors over there.
So when the series eventually came about, how early on were FX involved? Did they give you development money for it, or?
Well, I think they'd had the scripts. I think Nash had given them the scripts. So what you had was FX Australia originally, and they were pretty new, sort of new kids on the block, and they hadn't really done any Australian stuff as far as I'm aware. But because of all the quotas and stuff, they had to make something. They had to make something in Australia. And, they had the scripts and they kind of were, they had a bit of a deadline. They had to spend a certain amount of money by a certain time, to meet these local quotas or whatever. And, they had the scripts and they thought, oh, yeah, these aren't bad, I think, we like these. Let's make this. So it was kind of by chance to some degree, I suppose, that the show even got made in the first place. And then FX Australia, after all was said and done, FX Australia closed down, shut shop, and FX US really loved the show. What we thought was they'd probably, if they like it, they'll remake it. They'll set it in America and, my part would be played by, somebody more handsome or whatever. And, but that didn't eventuate. They just said, look, we just like it. We're just going to play it as it is, which was surprising, but very nice, that they dug the show that much. And, here we are.
Yeah, it feels so uncompromisingly Australian. It's got a wonderful tone. Were there any discussions about, catering it more to an American audience, or did they just want that pure, unfettered ochre buzz?
Yeah, FX never ever said anything about Americanizing the show, or probably the only pushback we ever get from FX is, can you please cut out some of the swearing?
There's great swearing in this show.
It's some of the best swearing that you'll ever hear. But we get, and practices goes through, the scripts, and, they count every swear word and the amount of Fs and, and Cs and all the rest of it. And, it's just one of those things. Like, you'll do a scene sometimes, depending on who you're doing it with, especially when I'm with, Damon Herriman, for example, if we're doing a scene, there's just Fs all over the place. And Nash has to sort of step in and say, guys, can you just, every second word is F, C, all this kind of stuff. So, it's just a weird Aussie thing, I guess. We tend to swear quite a bit, I think.
Yeah, C word. They really freak out about the C word in America, don't they?
They do. We do try to get
harmless.
it in there. You know what I mean? I think, it's good to have it in there every now and then. And, that's, I think last season we had more swear words than I think any other show in history or something or other. They're like, this is crazy, the amount of swearing. But look, if I had my way, there'd be a lot more. But,
I guess because FX has slightly more restrictions than something like HBO, where they can't quite go as full bore as premium cable. But it feels pretty unfettered. We saw in the VT at the start you explaining these kind of Aussie terms. I guess that element of explaining the world to an American audience came in a bit more on the marketing side of it. Is that the case, as opposed to making the show itself?
Yeah, we never really thought about, like, when we made it originally, it was just like, well, we're just making it for Australia. That's it. It's for an Australian audience, so we can just use all these words. And that's continued. We've never tried to kind of appeal to the American market or whatever, because I think once you start sort of second guessing yourself and trying to pander to people, it's not good. It's not good for the project. It's not good for what you're doing. You shouldn't pander. It should just be about, look, this is what it is. If you like it, that's great. If you don't, that's fine.
Yeah, the show definitely benefits from that. It's crazy to me that it's, as I said, so uncompromisingly Australian, but it's playing on this big mainstream American network. It kind of feels unprecedented, and it's congratulations to you for that.
Oh, thanks. But I think that's why it's playing, because it doesn't try to appeal to a wider audience. It doesn't try to appeal to anybody outside of Australia. It is just authentically Australian, and I think that's part of the, what's the word? I think that's one of the reasons why it's been, it's well liked, and why it's, it's all over the place now. It's not just in the US, it's all over the world now. The show's just gone everywhere because, it shows people, a different culture in a way, different attitudes, different ways of speaking, and that you don't really get to see. You don't really get to see that when you're outside Australia and you're somewhere else. You don't really get to see Aussie shows that are really Aussie, many of them. So, and that helps us,
It has a very natural sense of authenticity in its portrayal of criminality. You mentioned that you'd read several books about that, but how did you do any other kind of research? I mean, did you speak to people in this world? Where does that authenticity come from?
Yeah, a little bit of it speaking to people. It's reading, it's speaking to people. It's mostly reading. It's mostly, reading just, non-fiction accounts, true crime accounts, of, that kind of world and the way it is. And, if you read enough about it, you start to understand how it all works and why it works the way it does. And And that's, just the research, I guess. That's a really super important part of it, because I didn't have a lot of experience, virtually zero experience with, actually, committing crimes. I think I stole something when I was a kid and felt really bad. That's about my only some sewing thread from a haberdashery store, I think, when I was about 8. So that's my criminal career, basically. So I had to do a lot of research, talk to people, and then try to sort of understand, okay, well, how does this person's mind work? How is it that it's okay for this guy to do what he does? And yeah, that was a major part of it, trying to figure that out, because if I'm going to play this guy, I'm going to understand, understand how he thinks, and I've got to actually like him too. If I don't like the guy, how am I going to play it? So, yeah, I guess books mainly was the thing.
Well, building on that, even more so than the authenticity of the criminality, there's a psychological authenticity to this character that it's not a lot of it is articulated, but you sense that there is some real trauma in his background, and that he's dealing with that in interesting ways. How did you come about sort of setting up a backstory for this character, and how much you wanted to sort of reveal about him in the first season?
Well, some of that is personal, I guess, or a lot of that is personal. I've had my own sort of personal struggles, and I think that without that, I wouldn't be able to pull it off. As a writer and as an actor, I wouldn't be able to pull it off if I didn't have, hadn't gone to sort of dark places and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, sorry, what was the question?
Well, just sort of, I think you answered it. The thinking behind what kind of backstory you wanted to give Ray when we were getting to know him throughout the first season.
Yeah, some of it was personal accounts I'd read of criminals, about what they'd been through as kids and all that kind of stuff, and there's some of my own stuff in there. People I know. It's sort of just an amalgamation of just a lot of different people. Some real, some not real, some semi-real. Because when you read these accounts, you read books that are non-fiction. They're not really always. There's always some element of fiction to them. It's trying to sort of figure out what's fact and what's not.
Yeah, it's an interesting thread in the second season when he begins talking to this journalist who's writing a book. It's sort of one of the first times outside of perhaps the anger management classes where you see someone forcing Ray to kind of consider his own attitudes and path. Was that thread in this second season inspired by some of that research and some of those books you read?
That was actually inspired by a conversation that I had with the journalist. She was asking me a bunch of questions and I was answering them because she was trying to understand what made Ray tick. And as I was explaining it to her, she was sort of saying, well, that's really interesting. That changes my opinion and my perspective on the character. And then after the conversation, I thought, well, why don't I just put that in the show somewhere? Why don't I just have a journalist in the show and Ray can basically say what I've just said in that interview, but he can say it in the show.
Yeah.
Where the whole idea for that came from. And that's where a lot of ideas come from. It's just real life. A lot of the stuff that's in there is stuff that's happened to me, and I've slightly changed it, here and there for dramatic, purposes. Or, season 2, there's a conversation where Ray and Gary are sitting around a campfire and they're talking about calamari. And that whole scene was inspired by me going round to Justin Rosniak, who plays Gary. I went round to his house one day and I went round for dinner and he's complaining about the fact that he just bought a whole bunch of calamari and he'd left it in the fridge and it had gone off, and he said, oh, look, I should have put it in a fresh bag. I should have washed it and then put it in the fridge, and then it wouldn't have gone off. And he said, what made me feel really bad about it was, I was watching this nature doco about octopus, and, apparently it was talking about the life cycle and how the female, when she's pregnant, she's got all these eggs and she doesn't eat for 6 months and she guards the eggs and then she dies when the eggs hatch. And he said, I feel really bad about eating, like I wasted all that calamari now because of that. And I said to him, I was standing in his kitchen, I said, mate, this could go in the show. This conversation could go in the show. He goes, oh, okay. I don't think he believed it. But then he got the scripts in season 2 and he's like, oh, yeah, it's in there. And then we're sitting around, doing it. And the interesting thing was the way I'd written it was, Ray kind of, Gary kind of says, well, that's it. I can't eat calamari. And that's how it was in the script. And then Nash said, hold on. Calamari's squid, isn't it? I went, yeah. Oh. And so that became the ending of that scene, where, Ray says, calamari squid, isn't it? And Gary goes, oh. He's like, oh, that's good. So that shows you, how it, a lot of the conversations in the show are just from real life, things that I've spoken about with other people.
I love the relationship between Ray and Gary. Beginning of season 1, it's kind of the first thing that happens is Ray having to show up and pretend that this Golden Shower DVD is his. It just sets such a wonderful tone for the first season. I was wondering, when you were writing the scripts for the first season, how did you expand the world of the film? What were the elements you realized you needed to bring in to make this a deeper, broader place for that first season?
Yeah. Well, I think the thing is, it's like I knew we had to see. I mean, the film focuses on his work life, and I knew we had to get his personal life in there to make it work, so that you could actually see him outside of what he does. So that was the first thing in thinking about, what kind of characters can I put in there? And I thought of, he's got a daughter. I mean, I think he had a daughter. I think he had a daughter in The Magician. I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm not sure if it's ever mentioned. I think it might be. But, so there was that, and, he's got an ex-wife, and, he's got a mate, best friend, Gary, and, I figured I had to come up with a couple of set of characters for his inner circle,
And what about how his day job was that with the Damon Herriman character that kind of gives an element of structure to the show. Did you always know he was going to be a bouncer at a strip club kind of thing?
Yeah, not necessarily a bouncer at a strip club, but he was supposed to do odd jobs for Freddie, and then it became, well, why don't I just have him working there as well? Why don't I just have him doing security at the club? That's his kind of, his day job, I suppose. And then, killing people in between, I suppose. But stuff, it's a development process. You have ideas, and then other ideas come along, and then you change things, and
the daughter character is kind of the most grounding element of the show, and the most humanizing element of Ray's story. It can be shocking, the juxtaposition between the scenes between him and his daughter, and then some of the awful things he does. Was it just about showing how much of a good guy Ray was, and that he had this kind of, familial grounding element?
I'm not sure if it's so much about showing what a good guy he is, because I'm not really that interested in showing that he's a good guy, or I don't really care whether people like him or not. I'm just trying to sort of give like an honest as honest as I can, considering it's a TV show, an honest account as I can of a guy who does this job for a living, you know, and that's really all it's about. You know, he's got his like anybody, his flaws. You know, there's good things about him, there's bad things about him. And that's really it. And it's up to the individual to decide, hey, you know, I like him or I don't like him, or sometimes I like him and sometimes I hate him, or, you know, and it's okay to go through that, I think. You know, it's okay if sometimes you don't like him. You know, you're looking at him and you're like, I don't know if I really like him anymore. And then the next thing you're like, oh, okay, yeah, kind of do. Yeah, I like him. And, you know, I like putting the audience in that position where they're rooting for somebody that they definitely should not be rooting for, you know. And then they're kind of wondering, well, geez, what does this say about me if I like somebody like that? You know?
I realized something while finishing up season 2, that the show really reminds me of Curb Your Enthusiasm in a lot of ways, and that Ray is saying and doing things that a lot of us would like to say and do in certain situations. Has that comparison been drawn before? Is it? What do you think about that?
Yeah, people have mentioned it, and it definitely is. I mean, look, this show to me in a lot of ways is Curb Your Enthusiasm, except Larry kills people for a living. You know, that's really kind of. I mean, you look at episode 1. You know, it's kind of like this. You know, Ray throws a guy off some stairs, and it's kind of, you know, sort of dark and brooding and very black. And, you know, then Gary comes up and says, mate, I need a favour. I need you to come around to your house. What for? You know, my wife found one of my pornos and I need you to come around. And that's something you'd see in Curb Your Enthusiasm. You know, that is something that's, you know, who's the guy, Jeff, in Curb Your Enthusiasm? That's something you can imagine him saying to Larry, I need you to come around and take. You could put that in Curb Your Enthusiasm, you know, no problem. It's that kind of silly thing that happens. And I've heard from people when they watch the show, you know, in that first episode, they're kind of trying to figure out what it is, you know, what is this show? And then when Gary shows up and says, hey, you know, that's when they start to get what the show really is. Like, it's that juxtaposition between, okay, he kills people and it's, you know, it's dramatic and it's scary and it's all that sort of stuff. But there's also this kind of silly, funny, humorous side to the show as well. And it's those two things. It's, you know, it's Ray and his daughter, and you know, there's some sort of tender moments there, and then it's off back into the brutality, you know, because life is like that. Life doesn't have one tone. You know, life, you can be laughing at a funeral. You know, you can be laughing in some pretty horrible circumstances, and next minute, you know, you're crying, and, you know, life is tragic. It's all these things, and that's what, you know, we're trying to do with the show, is kind of make people feel different things, not just have this one tone where it's like it's a drama and it's just serious, and it's just, because that sort of stuff just bores me to tears, you know. And also just straight comedies. I don't like generally straight comedies. They bore me, you know. I want to see a bit of this. I want to see a bit of that, just like in real life, you know.
There is a definite sort of wish fulfillment element to it as well. I can perceive in that, as I mentioned, sort of he's taking care of business in a way that a lot of us might like to, but don't have the balls to do so. Are you sort of expressing your own frustration with how much dickheads behave like dickheads in the world?
Oh, absolutely. You know, it's definitely a part of it. You know, we'd all love to do some of the things Ray does, and that's, you know, we live vicariously, and it's why people watch shows like, you know, The Sopranos, you know, why that was so, you know, was watched by so many people and so well loved, you know, because there's that part of us that, you know, we're kind of programmed in society to behave a certain way. You know, that we've got to be good boys and good girls, and we've got to do this and we've got to do that. But it's why we love those characters that break out of that. You know, they're kind of breaking the programming. They're not afraid to be who they really are. You know, everybody's got a shadow self, you know, as Carl Jung, you know, would say. We've all got that dark part of ourselves. And, you know, a lot of people, they walk around and they pretend that they don't, and they ignore it, and they, you know, lock it up deep inside of them, and they never let it out, you know, because, you know, as a kid, if they did it, they'd get, slapped or told off or humiliated. We're programmed to be the people that we are. And I think there's something about, the Ray Shoesmiths who just don't fear the consequences, who would I be? If I didn't fear consequences, who would I be? I'd be a different person. I'd be in jail, basically. And that goes for a lot of people, I think. There's people that we want to hit with a baseball bat. I've never met anybody where I've said, is there anybody, you ever wanted to smack somebody in the mouth? The answer is never no. We've all got somebody that's got under our skin and we wanted to just kick them in the head, We didn't. Why? Because of consequences, we were worried about what would happen,
All I know
so
is...
we seriously through him when he does it because it's us doing it to so-and-so,
Yeah.
or so, we're getting that. We're getting that thrill from that.
I get very nervous every time ice cream is mentioned. Things always go badly around this character when someone's having an ice cream.
Yeah, it doesn't go too well, does it?
Did you write the entire first season before you shot it?
Yeah, look, I'd written it over a long period of time and done so many drafts and polishes. But yeah, the scripts were pretty much ready to go even before we got into pre-production, I think. They were sort of ready to go. Not so much with season 2. I was still writing through pre-production.
And when you were shooting that first season, the 6 episodes, did it play out how you'd kind of anticipated it would? Was there any kind of, did you have to shift anything or reframe anything based on how the shooting process went?
Well, originally it was going to be 8 episodes, and then we sort of cut it down to 6 because we didn't have a whole lot of money. We had very limited funds. But, we kind of shot everything that that was in there, and in the edit we kind of took stuff out. But originally this show was kind of devised. Originally, my plan was to shoot it very much in the same way as Curb Your Enthusiasm. Heavily improvised. That was. I don't even think Curb Your Enthusiasm, because see, The Magician was heavily improvised, and Curb Your Enthusiasm wasn't even around at that point. That was just something that I like to do. I like to improvise. I don't mind having scripts there to work off, but I like to improv because I feel like you get more naturalistic performances from everybody. But that was something, Nash is very different in that way. He likes to stick to a script most of the time. So we had to kind of, what's the word? What's that word?
Meet in the middle, compromise?
Yeah. There was compromise. There was compromise in a couple of areas. But I think, I think things have worked out pretty well considering. I don't think that the show's were worse off for the compromise. So it's worth making them in that case,
Yeah, I was interested to hear what degree of improvisation was there, because it feels very loose. It feels very conversational. But you're saying it's pretty tightly scripted overall.
Yeah, it is. It's very tightly scripted. Dialogue is something that, it took me a good 10 years to actually figure out how to write dialogue. And that's writing 7 days a week for 10 years. It was the hardest thing to get right. But once I figured it out, it's like riding a bike, you don't forget it. So, I go to a lot of trouble to make sure that the dialogue is as realistic as possible. So it sounds like the way people actually talk rather than, So, and that helps, it helps everybody, helps the actors. I think if they get scripts where they're not having to say stuff that doesn't sound like the way people talk. I don't think I could do that kind of acting.
I love that when Ray encounters people, something I realize you don't see in a lot of scripted TV. They go, "Hi, how's it going?" He's like, "Oh, I'm good, thanks. How are you?" It's so many shows skip over that, but it just brings such a naturalism to the interactions. I love that about it. Okay, so season 1, we locked off. It was a success. I think now we'll play the trailer for season 2 and start talking about that. So if you can run that VT, please. Tech team.
Are you Ray Shoesmith?
I don't answer questions. Can I help you?
We're looking for a Ray Shoesmith. Does he live here?
I don't answer questions.
Okay, is there somebody here who can answer questions?
I don't answer questions.
Would you mind telling us why?
I don't answer questions.
Okay.
See ya. I wasn't looking for trouble as a kid. I felt like I was weak. But I learned there's people in this world, they'll take and take till there's nothing left here. You got to fight back, you know. It's always better to give than receive.
Is it?
Bricky's dad.
Have you ever killed anybody?
Once. I'm just kidding, mate. I'm just kidding.
Nice eye.
Nice place.
There's a darkness in you, but I can't save you. I can only save myself.
Is that the goal? I'm going to teach you about loss. Get to work, you about loss!
Where's the kid? Nice.
Oh, no. I'm gonna win still.
No, you're not.
Yes, I am.
It definitely feels like there's an escalation in the second season. What lessons did you take from shooting the first season into, and what were your ambitions for expanding the show tonally and world-wise in season 2?
Well, I think the main thing with season 1 was it was written probably mostly sort of before about 2010, most of that material. So, you know, there was a fair few years in between, you know, where I, you know, matured. And, you know, season 1 was supposed to be kind of, you know, funny, exciting, interesting, entertaining. But it was never really meant to be much more than that. But with season 2, I didn't want to repeat myself as a writer and just go, well, that worked, so let's just do that again. I wanted there to be more to it. I wanted it to be more of a sort of character study, I guess, sort of flesh him out a little bit more. So, yeah, that's kind of where that's where sort of season 2 sort of came from.
You mentioned that you were still writing it when you were shooting season 2. You're the sole credited writer on every single episode. Is it a completely solo writing process? Are you getting feedback from your producers? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, we had a writers' room season 2, you know, and FX and Nash and Michelle are involved in that as well as the process, as well as Rita McVeigh, who's a New Zealander, is involved in that process as well of, you know, notes and structure and so yeah, I do the writing on my own, but there is definite help there from a bunch of people, you know, giving me feedback, you know, this sucks, that sucks, it's good, that's good, you know.
Do you enjoy writing? No one does.
I used to enjoy it. Now, there are times when I enjoy it. But on the whole, yeah, it's not that enjoyable. I have to say. I mean, it just depends what you're writing. I mean, you know, if you're doing a first draft, it's kind of enjoyable. You're doing a second draft, it's like pulling teeth. You know, and the more drafts you do, the harder it gets. You know.
Do you have a process? Do you like get up and do it first thing in the morning, or do you push things out, delay, procrastinate? How do you approach the actual physical act?
Well, I think procrastination is a key. That's the first stage in the process. Is procrastinate as much as possible. Don't do it. Don't do it. And then, you know, look at your schedule and go, well, gee, I got to do it, and then do it when you sort of absolutely positively have to. But I mean, the thing that I do, I don't like to sit in front of a screen and think about what I'm going to do. So I'll think a lot about what I'm going to do before I even sit down to write. So when I'm sit down to write, I've pretty much got to throw it out, and then it's just a matter of just there.
We talked about how there's this great element of the character that he's doing things and taking care of business in a way that a lot of us would like to. There's a very intense episode in season 2, episode 9, when a kid gets kidnapped and Ray cracks into action in a way we sort of haven't seen him do before. It's a very dark episode, but it also shows that Ray and his friends can kind of solve the situation perhaps better than the cops might be able to. What was your thinking around that episode?
Well, I guess it's kind of what you're saying there. It's like, you know, if you obey the laws, you know, you obey the laws. And if Gary and Ray had have obeyed the laws, they never would have got that kid back. So it's, you know, the end justifies the means. I don't know if that's the correct term to use, but you know, I know if I was in that situation, you know, I'd do whatever was necessary. You know, if I've got to go around to somebody's birthday party and put a hole in the roof with a shotgun, I'd have no problems doing that. You know, if it meant that, you know, I found, you know, that I found that person, you know, and I think that's what that episode is saying. You know, it's like, you know.
It's not like Ray doesn't face consequences either. It's quite severe consequences in his life for the actions he takes in that episode.
Yeah, he does. He does face consequences, but at the end of the day, he got the job done, you know. And that's really all that matters, you know. If you're going to try to save somebody from that, you know, what are you prepared to do, you know? And thankfully, he was prepared to do whatever it took.
Yeah, it's a very powerful episode, and it feels like a kind of a distillation of the worldview of the show in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Without giving too much away, there are some long-standing elements of the show that are seemingly gone by the end of season 2. Is the idea to just kind of keep it fresh and not let Ray's world sort of settle into too much of a routine? Was that the thinking behind sort of getting rid of some of those characters?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of just trying to keep it. I don't know whether it's a matter of keeping it. Like, I think, you know, characters come in and they kind of serve their purpose. You know, they come in for a reason, and then it's just when they've served their purpose, it's just time for them to go. And if you keep them around, it's not going to help. It's not going to help the show. You know, they've got to sort of move. They've got to move aside to allow, other characters to come in that are going to take the show into other areas. You know, I mean, it's easy to sort of leave them there. You know, you kind of go, well, season 1 worked with these characters, let's just keep them around. But I think that actually works against you, because, I mean, the audience will, you know, if you're doing that, the audience is going to grow a little tired of it, you know. You know, you feel that. You watch shows and you're like, why is this character even still here? You know, they've served their purposes. They've said what they've had to say. Now it's just dead air. You're like, get rid of them, you know. And so, you know, It's just part of trying to keep it fresh and keep, surprising the audience, having, characters just sort of disappear, so that the audience never gets entirely comfortable, They're not like, oh, well, this character's going to be around for every season of the show, I can relax, It's not the case. And it's, part of the thing as a writer is you're trying to, and this is where I have a problem with, the way things are these days, with the way people teach writing. They're teaching people about, structure, that there's got to be all these formulas for, when you're writing, you've got to do this and you've got to do that. You've got to have a plot point and you've got to have blah, blah over here and blah, blah over there. The problem with that and writing that way is that you end up not surprising your audience. Your audience, either consciously or subconsciously gets to know the formula, They become aware of what the formula is. And then so when they're watching something, they know what's going to happen next. And I find that all the time, when I'm watching stuff, I'm like, well, I know what's going to happen at the end of this episode, or I know what's going to happen in this scene, because everything now is so formulaic. Well, not everything, but most things are formulaic, I think. And people don't sort of seem to write from their gut. They seem to write from, this accepted formula of this is if you're going to do a TV show, this is what you've got to do and this is how you got to do it. And I've always been very anti that.
You did such a good job with those characters, though. I missed them.
Well, that's the whole point. You're supposed to.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to go, oh, geez, I'm glad. Oh, God, I'm glad that guy died. Or, I mean, sometimes, sure, you want the bad guys in the show to die. I mean, that's part of it. But you also should miss the, because if you don't miss these characters, I haven't done my job.
Yeah.
You're supposed to. You're supposed to be sad. You're supposed to miss them. You're supposed to think about them, and that's the whole point. That's the whole point of it,
Yeah, the show. Yeah.
That's life.
The show is more powerful for it because, as I said, you get there's consequences in Ray's life for the decisions he makes, and a lot of shows kind of circle around those. So I love that about it. Just before we go into the audience Q&A, what can you tell me about season 3? I'm very excited.
Nothing.
So there'll be new characters coming in to replace those ones that are gone, or?
Well, no, basically season 3 is in episode 1, somebody puts Ray in a coma. We don't see who it is. And for the whole season, Ray's in a coma. So basically it's hospital bed, Ray coma. And in the final episode, in the last scene, Ray sort of slowly starts to open his eyes and come out of the coma.
I'll go down whatever path you want to take us down, Scott. You've earned that at this point. Okay, I've got some audience questions here. As a writer, how did you approach restructuring the story from feature to episodes? And what challenges did you face in keeping it going for subsequent series?
Restructure. Well, it was interesting. I mean, I'd never written for TV before. So it wasn't so much about restructure. I mean, basically what I'm trying to do, if I can, is make mini movies. I'm trying to make 25-minute movies. Where you've got the start, you've got the middle, you've got the end. And then the music track at the end that sort of hopefully ties it all together. And that's basically what I was trying to do. Basically.
You mentioned that it took you 10 years to learn how to write authentic dialogue. What advice would you give writers when it comes to writing authentic dialogue? What did you learn over those 10 years?
The most important thing about writing dialogue is, this is what I learned. Don't think about what you're going to write before you write it. Don't get it perfect in your head and go, well, what am I trying to say? Okay, I'm going to say this and then write it. Just write it. No filter. Just write it. There was a scene in season 2 where Gary and Ray are talking about James Bond. right? Who's the best James Bond? Oh, yeah, Sean Connery. And then who's that other guy? There's that other guy. And it was Daniel Craig. But the thing is, when I wrote it, I couldn't remember his name. So I just kept writing. I didn't go and look it up and go, well, who is that guy? I just kept writing it so I didn't interrupt the flow of the dialogue. And then at the end, I just left it because it was funnier to leave it without actually saying who it was. And Gary can't figure it out either. He's like, oh, yeah, you know that guy. He's number 4. So, you know, the whole thing is, you know, to get the dialogue, you know, authentic and flowing, you have to let it flow. You know, you have to, you know, and like when I'm writing dialogue, you know, I'll say, like I just said then, I said, you know. My characters will say, you know, as they're talking, you know. Because that's how people talk. That's speech patterns. You know, in real life, people have speech patterns. The unfortunate thing is when you're watching a movie or a TV show, the speech patterns of the actors, the characters in these shows don't match the speech patterns of people in real life. And if you can match those patterns, that hooks the audience in because they go, well, geez, these are real people. These aren't characters in a movie. These aren't fake two-dimensional things. These are like real people. Like I know a guy like that, or I know a girl like that, or I know that's like my uncle, or my, you know. And that's the whole point of writing. Because if you look at my dialogue, it's like I'll be starting a sentence and then halfway through a sentence there's a comma and then I start another sentence and I go back to something I was, you know, because I'm just vomiting this stuff out as I'm writing it. I hope that answers your question.
It's a great answer. There's some tangible advice in there. Did you at any point consider handing off the responsibility of writing the show to anyone else?
Oh, absolutely.
But you haven't done that yet.
I won't do it.
Is that because of a sense of ownership or?
I mean, you know, the way that I write is very, very different to the way most other people write. And, you know, it's that thing of like, you know, if I let somebody else do that, you know, what is the show going to be? It's not going to be the same show. You know, it might be a good show or, you know, or whatever, I don't know, but it's not going to be the same show if I don't write it because the way that I write is just very different to the way most people write, I think, you know. And it would be about finding people. If I could find people that wrote the way that I wrote to keep the tone the same as it is, sure, I'd do it. But, you know, I don't personally know anybody that writes that way. So it's kind of hard for me to do that, you know.
It does have a singular voice, this show. So please don't do that.
Yeah, it does. And it's the same with, if you go, you know, with other directors, you know, you kind of lose something there too, you know, and it becomes a different kind of show.
Was writing season 3 easier, harder than writing season 2?
Oh, look, I'd say it's hard to say. I mean, they're all hard. I mean, the problem with season 3 was, you know, I was kind of feeling like, have I said everything I've wanted to say? You know, have I really got anything to say? Should I keep going? And but, you know, because you've got that thing of, okay, season 1, you know, it was well received, and season 2 was, you know, probably better received than season 1, and you kind of feel like you've got to go, you know, every time you've got to up the stakes. And I thought, well, you know, how am I going to top season 2? You know, I don't think I can. You know, if I can do something as good or that I feel is as good, I'll be happy with that. So there's that pressure, you know, there's that pressure of, you know, is it going to suck, basically, that you've got to carry that weight the whole time that you're writing it.
Do you take any strength from how well the show is received? Does that give you more confidence as a writer?
Yeah, but it's actually within that are the seeds, kind of, I don't know, for your own destruction. I mean, it's, you know, if you make a TV show and season 1's like, it's okay, then you don't feel that pressure to kind of, I've got to do something really, really, you can just be like, oh, okay, well, I can just do something okay, and that'll get me over the line season over season, But when you have something that, I don't think an Australian TV show has ever been picked up by an American sort of cable network or whatever and just premiered in the US first before it premiered anywhere else in the world. So there's a lot of firsts for this show, and it's been so well received. I mean, you read the reviews and stuff, and they're pretty, especially season 2. It's like, then you feel you've got to live up to that. You know what I mean? Whereas if they canned the show and said it was a pile of garbage, then you wouldn't feel that pressure to actually, that you've got to meet these standards. So it actually is terrible. So hopefully, they'll come out season 3 and go, well, this is a pile of crap, but, let's see 4. And that takes the pressure off then,
Just one more audience question here. As the creator, how do you ensure that you have editorial control of the show?
I generally carry a knife most of the time, that I'm on set, and especially in pre-production. And that generally, I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things of, it's just a respect thing, you know what I mean? I don't work with people who are, going to ignore me or don't respect what I do, you know what I mean? And there's mutual respect there, you know what I mean? If I want to do this, I'll talk to Nash about it, and if he wants to do that, he'll, and it's the best idea wins. It's like, if he wants to cast this person, and I don't like that person, then he's got to convince me as to why he wants that person. And the same, if I really feel strongly about somebody, I'll say, hey, look, this is why I think that guy should be playing this character. And the same with ideas, it's, I remember saying to him recently, or a couple of months ago, my job, it's kind of like I'm a goalkeeper and I'm standing in the goal, and basically people are firing their ideas at me, especially when it comes to getting notes on the writing process, on the scripts. And my job is to let the right balls in the goal and stop the wrong ones from getting in there, you know what I mean? Because everybody, as well-meaning as they are, everybody wants to make the show better, but sometimes they give you ideas that just patently suck. So, my responsibility is to make sure they don't get in the back of the net while letting the good ones in, And it's tough because, some people, they get their, everybody's got an ego. Everybody thinks their ideas are great. And maybe they are, but at the end of the day, it's, as the writer or the creator, it's my decision, in the writing process to make sure that only the good stuff gets in there.
Our time is wrapping up now, but I've been wanting to ask you throughout this, have people come up to you and said that they know people like Ray? Or that and accused you of basing it on someone they know or something?
Oh, not necessarily that, but, I was talking to we were shooting last night in the Armourer, the guy who's responsible for providing all the guns for the show. He's like, oh, God, I knew a guy like Ray. He was a Czechoslovakian dude and he was KGB trained and, and he killed people for a living. So, yeah, I get it all the time. I've got an uncle or I knew this guy or, I think a lot of people out there know a Ray, a family relative or a friend or, whatever, there's Rays all over the place.
Well, I'm a big fan of this Ray. So really great to talk to you, Scott. Thanks for giving us your time today. The show is amazing. I hope it goes for many more seasons, and it's great that it's got such a unique voice and is getting that nice, authentic Aussie vibe out there. So everyone, let's thank Scott for his time today.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Cheers. Thanks again. See you later. Thanks for coming, everyone. Hope you enjoyed that. Mr. In-Between is on Neon, I think. Only season 2, though, which is messed up. Check it out if you can. Thanks a lot.
The Big Screen Symposium 2020 was brought to you by Screen and J&A Productions. We gratefully thank our event partners, the New Zealand FilmCommission, New Zealand On Air, Te Māngai Paho, Images and Sound, Screen Auckland and AUT. Voiceover is by me, La Lena Feonati, and music by Poddington Bear.